Good morning, everyone. My name is Josh Tani, and these are my colleagues,
Carlos Castro.
Ashley Olsen.
and we're here on behalf of Brian Head to help Autoliv present its thanks event to Nissan. So just a little bit of our presentation. We've broken up into 4 sections. We have a brief introduction we want to get to you guys, and then we have our data analysis, a solution proposal, and then we're going to finish with a brief conclusion. So for Autoliv and Nissan, we want to put these companies side by side, show why they work so well together, because they have similar visions with ensuring that they're saving more lives and enriching people's lives together. And they also, in their mission, they want to both be industry leaders. And then also with their values, they have similar values by being transparent and basically being environmentally safety, dynamic performance, and life on board. And something also similar about these 2 companies is they both have very lean supply chains, which is going to be a major factor throughout the rest of our presentation. So before we wanted to jump into actually getting our calculations and everything like that, we wanted to make sure we were all on the same page in regards to our objectives and our priorities that we understood that were given to us through the case. So for our objectives, we found that there were 3 primary objectives displayed in the case. We wanted to reevaluate Nissan's current fulfillment process to determine if this is the most efficient way that we can supply them. We wanted to see if we could find any additional cost savings for Nissan through the reevaluation. And then we always wanted to be a source of innovation to see if we come up with any additional ways for them to save money. Next, for our priorities. Our first priority for the case was to examine Nissan's current fulfillment process. And this is just determined to make sure that we're supplying as efficiently as we can. Next, we wanted to do a cost analysis to determine what is Nissan's best course of action for the immediate future. And then we also want to look to and prepare for the future and how it will affect all parties involved. So before we could actually get into the calculations, we had to make just a few assumptions. So just to briefly go over it, we had to make sure some of our assumptions were that each facility gets the same amount of shipment between Canton and Smyrna, I think that's how you pronounce it. The per mile rate that is given to us by our truckload motor carrier remains constant. We are calculating with a 360-day work year and a 51-week year. We're using a standard 53-foot trailer with 26 pallet positions per trailer, and that there are 27 totes per pallet for airbags with a stack height of 3, and that there are 8 totes per pallet for airbags with a stack height of 2. In terms of combination per truckload, when we were calculating the new trucks in one of our calculations, we assumed that 27 tote pallets and 8 tote pallets were not compatible. And that we also assumed that the 20% cost of capital is consistent for all of Nissan's products. So now that the assumptions are out of the way, we can jump right into the data analysis. I'm going to pass it over to Carlos to go over the data with you guys.
Okay, so how did we approach this problem? Okay, so we wanted to focus on the things that Nissan was going to consider. So really value creation between either going through our cross-dock or going direct to their facility. So we had to look at cost trade-offs, and the things we decided to focus on were handling costs, carrying costs, and transportation costs. So under our current fulfillment strategy, we have handling costs of $25,000, carrying costs of $26,000, and an unknown transportation cost of $1, which I'll explain a little bit later. And just to clarify, these are all assigned to Nissan. This is their the deal. So looking at our current fulfillment strategy, we can see that we have pallets per year per product. What we did was we took our $6.60 handling cost at the Olive Branch location, and we assigned that to each of these numbers. Then we took the values and we summed them out. This gave us a handling cost of $25,000. So next, let's look at volumes. We have annual volumes for each product. What we decided to do was we took Nissan's purchase price and we multiplied it by each of these volumes. That gave us values for each product, and so we summed those. We multiplied it by 20%, which is our cost of capital, and then we divided that by 360 days, which is our assumed work year, to give us a daily cost of capital. We multiplied that by 7 days of inventory processing, and that's on Nissan's end in their manufacturing facilities. That gives us a carrying cost of $26,000. So why did we assign a transportation cost of 0 or unknown? This is because we weren't given a value for the transportation between the Olive Branch location and the Nissan facilities. Considering how short these movements were, we considered these as negligible, so we left them alone. So, direct shipment to Nissan facilities. What I'd like to point out is that we had two options. So we could have, considering what the case told us, we could have taken it two ways. We could have gone direct to each location and gone back and forth for each one. We decided to make a loop. So we went from Ogden over to Smyrna, down to Canton, and back up to Ogden. So what this did was it gave us a handling cost of $0 for Nissan. It gave us a carrying cost of over $26,000, which was what we assigned to the cross-dock facility. And then it gave us a transportation cost of $400,000. That's in addition to the transportation costs that we had at our cross-dock facility. So why do we have a handling cost of 0? Well, this is simple, because we eliminated the handling cost at our Olive Branch facility. They're no longer paying for that because it's direct shipped to them. How does this affect our other costs? So we know that we have a carrying cost of over $26,000. Why is this? Well, if we give them responsibility for the shipment from Ogden to Olive Branch, they're taking over that 2-day leg. So that's automatically 2 extra days of transportation. So this leaves us, so what we're assuming now is that we have fewer shipments, which means we have increased inventory levels on each shipment and decreased shipment frequency, which also increases our carrying costs. Finally, we have a transportation cost increase of $400,000. The elimination of daily short movements between the Olive Branch and Smyrna and Canton facilities is responsible for this. So you have to consider that now they're responsible for going from Ogden all the way to Smyrna. They're going down to Canton and then back up. So that's the full forward and back transportation costs.
Yay, okay. So you can actually look in your booklet. You might have seen already that we have more of our in-depth calculation and analysis so that we didn't have to go through all the nitty-gritty with you. But I think the long story short is that even though the numbers are kind of overwhelming and maybe confusing, the solution is pretty clear. The only real viable option is just for us to maintain with the fulfillment strategy that we have now. For numerous reasons, the main being that it benefits all parties involved. It keeps inventory low, costs low, and perhaps most importantly, it really supports the whole ideal of lean manufacturing, which both companies really support. It's in their culture. We weren't exactly happy with just this solution, considering Autoliv and Nissan both focus on continuous improvement. We decided that we wanted to decide or determine what we could do more to make the strategy more appealing for all parties involved. And we started to look at other top-tier companies that were making innovations in the field. And the ones that we noticed were IKEA and Unilever, both within a relative amount of years, has increased its integrated sustainability. And by that I mean IKEA specifically has used styrofoam for most of its existence, and recently they changed their styrofoam entirely into a mushroom fungus, which is interesting, but completely eliminated their waste. As you can see, this is coming straight out of an IKEA report. They achieved their goal of absolutely zero waste going to landfill, and over, I believe, 96 or 90% getting recycled, which is incredible, especially for a company of such size. And then perhaps more impressively is Unilever, which has almost entirely refocused their company into sustainability and environmental impact. And they cover a lot of brands, as you can see, Dove's, Ben & Jerry's. Those brands that they switched into integrated sustainability actually had profits in all areas, but in terms of monetary, they're doing 30% better and increasing faster than all their other businesses, which did not implement this. So I'm sure you're wondering, what does this have to do with Autoliv? And of course, something that we heard time and time again in the tour and interviews and research is that Autoliv has made great steps in reducing cardboard, and not just in terms of environmental waste, but because it's a one-stop shop. You use a cardboard box once, you throw it away, and it's a waste, and we don't like waste here. And they moved to plastic, which is really great. But continuous improvement, what we could do more. And Unilever and IKEA both implement a thing called circular economics, which is the idea that you invest into resources that will come back in a cyclical structure. So for that, it would be perhaps the plastic tubs could be used with 100% recyclable materials. So at the end of their 4-year lifetime, instead of being thrown out or wasted, they could be melted down and recycled either into more tubs or perhaps another resource for the company. And that all applies because together it lowers costs for not just Autoliv, but all of their suppliers and consumers that have touch points, have contacts with those boxes, but also it supports the culture of continuous improvement, improving sustainability, and just in terms of public eye, I think where we are today, it seems silly not to move toward environmentally friendly, if not just for the environment, because everyone supports that, and we like to be liked, right?
Yeah. So we went over a short-term goal for Autoliv, and now we're going to talk about a long-term goal. So for long-term, we want to think about how the olive branch contract will be ending in 4 years. So after that contract ends, we want to find an optimal location. To find an optimal location, we use the exact grid model. It's a calculus-based model. It minimizes the ton miles. It can be used for air and interstate distances. We want to assume that deterministic demand and freight volume are known. Cost is proportional to distance and volume. Endpoints must be served, and the solution space is a continuous plane. So to do the exact grid model, we want to first create this table. So for all of the facilities that use the olive branch crossdock, we want to find the X and Y coordinates using a grid over the map. Then we'll need to know the volume and rate per shipment per facility. Since we didn't know that, these are just example numbers. With those 4 variables, we're able to find weight, distance, and cost. And to find the objective, which is the total cost minimization and overall lower transportation costs, we need to use Excel solver. So to do that, we need to set the objective to the I-12 and then find the X and Y coordinates for the new facility location. Excuse me. So this is what it would look like after you press solve. And the X and Y values right here, this is exactly where we would want to put the facility location. It's the optimal result. So I know we went over a lot with you today, a lot of numbers, but in conclusion, we want to maintain the current fulfillment operation with Nissan. We also want to enhance our sustainability. Where it's already good right now, we want to enhance it by using circular economics. And finally, we want to find a new facility location that is optimal. Thank you.
All right, thank you guys. So, no, I appreciate you guys' analysis. Just a few questions there. So on the very last slide, you guys are using the solver optimization tool. So if you were to look at that, is there if you guys were taking this one step further, where is that location? Did you guys look on a map or anything like that? Where is the?
We weren't able to calculate it because we didn't have the volume and the rate. So if we had those 2 values, we'd be able to calculate it.
Okay. saw that the volumes you had, you're right, you probably didn't have the volumes, but you were a little bit off on the volumes, but I think I get your, the whole idea right there.
Yeah, those were all
Those are just fabricated, right?
Yes.
Arbitrary.
Gotcha.
Yes, sir.
That's an interesting concept, and something we kind of looked at, so I'm just curious if you guys had a different location there, picked out in all branches. All branches are pretty close to Memphis, so it's kind of a good location.
Well, it's also something we want to go, I'm sorry.
Oh, you're good.
It's also something we want to recalculate, knowing that 2 new manufacturing events are going to be coming online within the scope of our, after our contract.
After contract with all branches.
Mhm.
Okay.
And so we want to see where those 2 manufacturing events would pull the new optimal location.
In addition, perhaps Nissan eventually gains the volumes that it would take to do direct shipping, so that would also pull the coordinates in maybe different directions, if they're taken off of that route.
Gotcha. So, another question I had, something we are challenged with this is just the risk. Do you guys think much about the risk that's associated with those moves from Utah to Nissan plants? Maybe we should expand on that a little bit. So when I say risk, I'll give you a little hint. You guys drive into school here today?
Yes.
How's the roads?
Pretty icy.
I think I mentioned it too in my tour, that one of our biggest challenges is driving across a wide opening, so just maybe expand on that.
And that was actually something we were curious about, because in the case you guys said you lost 4 trucks, and we were wondering, because originally we were going to calculate risk by actually finding the cost of those trucks, the actual tractors themselves, but those are handled by the trucking company, CRA with it.
That's correct.
And so then we were going to calculate the actual cost of what was in the tractor.
Right.
But just,
Right, but we didn't have any idea as to what exactly the mix was in that trailer. So although we wanted to tackle that problem, we didn't have the resources to go ahead and do that accurately. We didn't feel like we were going to have an accurate number.
Gotcha. All right. And I think what I was more talking about is, the truck actions, they're bad, and we don't like those. We obviously have insurance for that kind of stuff. So we get reimbursed for those, at least the cost of the product packaging. The risk I'm more talking about is the risk of, keeping the Nissan plant running and stuff like that.
Okay.
So you guys have thought about that at all, and some of the mitigation activities that could be taken.
well, I know,
Without having a crosstalk.
Yes.
With a crosstalk, we have some inventory there, right?
Right.
In the model that if we do the big milk run, there's really nowhere for that inventory to be. It's all probably in Utah, right?
Right.
So,
well, I know because we actually do the same thing in Denton. Is we have Alliance Airport nearby, and there's actually a company that flies automotive parts for emergency runs. Basically, when something happens along the supply chain, it basically cuts off the circulation to those automobile manufacturers in Mexico. And they are there ready to charge to fly immediate resources to those automobile parts to keep them up and running. Because I believe Derek said the other day it costs about $6,000 a minute if a manufacturing plant goes offline, or an automobile manufacturing plant goes offline. So of course, we want Nissan to be able to avoid having that possibility of having that happen.
And so you had mentioned the other day that it's really expensive to fly.
absolutely.
And that's another thing that we wanted to look into with risk, but we also didn't have a number for that, so we couldn't investigate into that. One thing about the long distance runs is, like we mentioned, there'll be less trips, but that means you're sending more inventory per trip. So the reason we went away from that is the reason that it would kind of hedge against risk is because you're going to have more inventory in both places. We didn't really want to go that route because we understand from your perspective, in your location, space is limited. And so if we start stockpiling you and we start stockpiling Nissan with more inventory, that's going to just create more problems, and it's going to go away from the kind of operations that you like to, which is lean manufacturing.
Okay. All right, thank you. All of you guys asked questions.
You talked about the recycling and the different type of packaging. Did you guys happen to come up with, if you were looking down that road, was there anything that you thought of when you're looking at the weight and the type of material that we're transporting that would come up with?
Yes, we did. Okay, we actually had 2 main, methods that we were going to branch off of. The one is if we stay with plastic. There's a statistic I wanted to bring out. wasn't certain that the Autoliv plastics are 100% recyclable. I hadn't heard anything, so I didn't want to state anything. If they aren't, there's actually a statistic that plastics that aren't 100% recyclable, I think, have a 60% rate of still landing in the landfill. And so we did a lot of research of actually recycling, I guess, companies in Utah, and specifically in Ogden, that perform exactly that for warehouses, for companies, where it's the type of thing where, kind of relationship where they donate materials, maybe excess materials that they have in their warehouse, maybe totes that have been damaged, they can't use anymore. That company melts them down, remix them in the totes, and then they can either have a relationship where they purchase them back, or I guess we have them more free depending on the relationship. That was in terms of plastic, was just quite simply recycling what we already had. In terms of if we wanted to go away from plastic, there actually is a material that's just plant fibers. And I don't know if you guys have seen it. They have like paper plates in stores, but it's plant fibers. It's actually very, very sturdy and very, very light. It's surprising. So that was an alternative option that we kind of researched into if we wanted to, I guess, venture away entirely from the cyclical engineering type thing to still, in the sense that in our tour and in the Q&A, I think they mentioned quite a few times that the suppliers and customers had a bad habit of stealing totes. That was an option for, it's not a loss to lose and buy the gradable tote, if that makes sense. So those were the two that we really, really researched.
What was the cost comparison on those, if you look at what we were showing, it cost for the current packaging versus what you were looking at?
Right. Well, I can't say specific. I'll say that right now. That is entirely up to the amount of totes they do. The company you go with, they're different if you buy them for. It would be cheaper in general in terms of research.
I was going to build off that because of the fact that we're using our raw materials, we're supplying them with basically the totes that are hitting their 4-year lifespan. It would reduce the cost of creating one tote because we're supplying them the raw material. So we would receive some of that kickback for costs.
Right.
But to put a specific number on it, we were not given the actual price. Well, we were given the price of the tote, but we were not able to come up with an actual price of what the new tote would cost.
Right, and then long term, and the whole cyclical cycle saves money because, like I said, it's not in 4 years out, it's in 4 years and it keeps going, so it kind of saves you profit. As terms as the plant fiber, those are cheap, pretty cheap to make in terms of just containers. The issue is they're pretty much one-time use, kind of like cardboard. So that would be slightly more expensive in terms of loss, not necessarily waste, because again, they're biodegradable, but it kind of goes, you know, recyclable plastic, plants, old totes.
Just, I guess, make you guys feel good, we do recycle. I don't know what you found for recyclable plants here around Ogden, Utah, but you probably found a lot. We're actually partnering with the company. All our totes are recyclable.
Which company?
ProPack. Yeah. Yeah, I was curious to know if you were going to say that. Yeah, we use ProPack for all of our stuff. We have some of those other fiberboard inserts like that, and I'm not sure that what we use quite the fiber stuff we use, but we do use kind of a recyclable, fiberboard for internal things. It's not really cheap right now.
Well, I did want to throw out there that you mentioned, or I believe one of your program managers mentioned that, perhaps the case lead, you mentioned that you guys have styrofoam in your boxes. Maybe mushrooms, I don't know. Just a thought.
Any questions? Or?
The biggest one I had was not the risk, but I thought you answered it.
All right, curious on your guys' calculation. Right at the first one, your assumption was your 20%, right? Your 20%. I think that was your calculation for inventory carrying costs. You guys call it capital costs.
Yeah.
How do you guys come up with that? Is that just
That number was
something? Was that?
it was providing the case. It said with Nissan's 20% cost of capital. And so we kind of saw that and we went, this is the only number where we could actually use to formulate cost of carrying. So we kind of assumed that that was what that was given.
I just wanted to see what you guys, because we've used, I'm not sure if there's a magic number out there. We've always kind of used 25 to 30.
Okay.
I do know that 20% of capital wasn't the case, so just curious when I come with that. So. All right. Okay. No further questions, I guess. So, all right. Okay. Good job, you guys.
Thank you so much.
Thank you again.
Not too bad.